Welcome back to Shifting Lanes. My name is Hanson, and for this video, I'm standing right in front of the 2023 Toyota Supra, and this one has a 6-speed manual. Now, I've reviewed the Toyota Supra about 5 times on this channel already, so if you want to see my previous impressions of the car, check out the links in the description box or up in that corner. So I figured for this one, I'm going to compare this 6-speed manual Supra with the Nissan Z with a manual transmission as well. You see, the last time I reviewed a Toyota Supra was back in the spring of 2021, and back then there were still rumors speculating about what the Nissan Z is going to be like. We knew that it was going to be making somewhere around 400 horsepower, available with a 6-speed manual transmission, and it was also going to have a lower sticker price compared to this Toyota Supra. 2 years have gone by, and now the Nissan Z is for sale if you can find one. And recently, I have reviewed it on this channel. The specs of that car, it's obviously a 3-liter V6 with twin turbos. It's making 400 horsepower and 350 pound-feet of torque. The curb weight of that car is about 3,500 to 3,600 pounds, depending on the equipment. And that one was the performance trim with a manual transmission. So it has the Exity high-performance clutch, LSD, it has a spoiler, the 19-inch forged raised wheels with Bridgestone Potenza S007 tires, which is pretty good tires, and it also has the better brakes. The base MSRP of that one is close to $50,000, and with some add-ons like the premium paint, some floor mats, and some of the superficial items and delivery, it comes out to just over $54,000. Can you find one at that price? Well, as for this Supra, this is the 3.0 Premium with the 6-speed manual transmission. It makes 382 horsepower and 368 pound-feet of torque. It has a curb weight of 3,400 pounds. It has an LSD adaptive suspension, 19-inch forged aluminum wheels with Pilot Super Sport tires. These are even better tires. And it has a base MSRP of $55,650. With the driver assistance package and delivery, this one stickers at $58,000. And I think you're going to have a better shot of getting this car compared to the Z. And there was also a report that almost half of new Supras come with a 6-speed manual transmission. The take rate, or basically the rate in which cars are produced between manual transmissions and automatic transmissions and which ones get sold. Usually manuals take up about 10 to 20%, so to see something that's almost in the 50% range is really shocking. And that just means that I think Toyota is going to up the production numbers for the 6-speed manual transmissions, making it a little bit easier to find. So considering that both of these cars are near the mid $55,000 range, back to the title, if I had a $60,000 budget, would I choose the Toyota Supra with a manual or the Nissan Z with a manual? We'll be going over that, and I'll be talking about many different factors in this video, so if you want to check out the chapters, feel free to jump ahead. But with that said, let's get this comparison started with the manual transmission. Now for this video, I only have the Toyota Supra, of course, because I reviewed the Nissan Z just a couple of weeks ago, but let's get this thing started. Now, let's start this with the 6-speed manual transmission. Both of these cars are going to have a rev matching feature. Now, Nissan was the first car company to introduce rev matching, or what they call synchro rev. This Toyota Supra calls it the intelligent manual transmission, albeit if you go into the menu systems up here, it'll say gear shift assistant. I think that's some miscommunication between Toyota and BMW when they were making this car. Now, both of these rev matching systems work really well, and if you're just learning how to use a manual transmission, rev matching is a really great learning tool. Now, when you're downshifting, the computer will automatically blip the throttle so that you can engage the lower gear without any shift shock or stutter. This is also especially helpful when you're on the racetrack where you have to heel and toe, and sometimes if you don't get it just right, you can upset the balance of the car because there's that mismatch in engine speed and you're going to lose some speed. So if you don't want to worry about heel and towing, just keep the rev matching feature on. As for the reverse gear, it is different between the Supra and the Z. For the Supra, the reverse gear is pressing it all the way to the left and then pushing forward. Whereas in the Nissan Z, you have to press down on the gear lever and press all the way to the right and back. Both of these manuals take a little bit more effort to shift into, especially when you compare it to something like a Honda shifter or what I personally daily drive, which is a Veloster N. Compared between the two though, the Supra shifter takes a bit more effort, it's very BMW-like, and it feels like the detents just require a bit more force to overcome. It feels like the transmission hasn't been broken in yet, but if you look at the mileage on this car, it has over 8,300 miles, so this is not like it's showroom new. Now, getting into the second gear also feels a bit tougher, whereas the Z's manual transmission feels a bit nicer compared to this one. But in the end, I think it's going to depend on your preference, so if you get a chance, test drive both of these manuals if you can. As for the clutch, the Z has the Exity Performance clutch, and I found the clutch spring force to be on the light side. The clutch engagement is also on the high side in the Z, and I thought it was really easy to drive and get into gear. It shouldn't be too tiring for bumper-to-bumper traffic, whereas the Supra's clutch is a little bit heavier, and the clutch engagement is also more towards the middle. And I find that when you're driving this thing, it's best to give it just a tiny bit of slippage for a smoother driving experience. And with bumper-to-bumper traffic, I think you'll get tired a bit faster with the Supra compared to the Z. As for the pedals, both cars have really nice pedal placement. I like that the gas pedal is hinged at the floor. This is very BMW-like, of course, and the pedal spacing is great. I really can't complain with any of these two. As for the seating position and the interior quality in general, I think the Nissan Z seating position and seat is a little bit more comfortable than this Toyota Supra. I think it's going to come down to personal preference again, so make sure you test drive both. I like that the Z still has a manual handbrake, so for you drifters out there, you probably prefer that a little bit more. Whereas the Supra has this electronic parking brake that is a lot less satisfying to use. As for the interior quality itself and also the feel, I have to hand it over to the Toyota because this feels very BMW and it feels on the luxurious side. The leathers are nice. The switchgear is great. I like the placement of the iDrive controller, or whatever Toyota calls it now. But design and looks wise though, I like the Z slightly better. The interior looks more modern and driver focused, and I like the 3 additional gauges in the center, which is a Z signature. The screen is a bit more traditional feeling as well, whereas the Supra still has this tacked on tablet feel, and that was big in the mid 2010s, but now it feels a little bit old and odd looking. So yeah, looks wise, for the interior, the Z gets it. But when you start touching things in the interior, the quality and the feel is a little bit better in the Supra. You know, the Supra feels like a car that's $50,000 on the inside, whereas the Z, it'll make you feel like you overpaid. Now, if that doesn't convince you enough that the Supra is better, you should peek inside the Z's trunk because it is laughably small at 7 cubic feet, whereas this Supra, it is still small, but it's a lot more usable at 10 cubic feet. As for the driving experience, I understand this is a very big umbrella category, so I'll try to break it down as neatly as possible. Both of these cars are immensely fun to drive. They're powerful, they handle really well, and they're very quick. With the Z, relatively speaking, the Z feels more sluggish compared to the Supra. It has an extra 100 to 200 pounds to carry around, again, depending on the equipment. And the chassis also feels a bit more compliant and not as stiff. Tires also make a ton of difference. I wish I had a good way of comparing the two cars with identical tires. The Nissan Z had the Bridgestone Potenza S007, and when I had it, the tires felt undersized for the car. It never gave me enough grip to the point where I felt confident with the car. Whereas this Supra, this has the Pilot Super Sport tires. It also has the same 275/35 size, and these tires feel really amazing. It gives the Supra plenty of grip to the levels where I feel more comfortable pushing the car to the edge. As for the chassis, it feels more stiff in the Supra, and perhaps that's the benefit of having a more modern platform, whereas the Nissan Z is basically a 370Z, which is a 15-year-old platform at this point. The wheelbase of the Supra is also 3 inches shorter at 97 inches, making the Supra feel more darty and nimble. As for the steering feel, both the Nissan Z and the Toyota Supra have EPS, or electronic power steering. That's just the state of the industry now. Having an EPS, it allows cars or modern cars to have really good lane keeping system and also some proactive accident avoidance stuff at the expense of sacrificing a little bit of steering feel compared to older hydraulic systems. Now, electronic power steering systems have come a long way, and I think these systems found in these cars are not too bad at all. The lane tracing system in this one is really nice. If the road curves, this thing will actually follow it pretty well, and it's not going to ping pong between the lanes like older lane tracing systems. That being said, not all EPS systems are created equal. They still have to be tuned properly, and in my opinion, the Supra steering feel isn't quite the same as what I felt in the Nissan Z. With the Supra, it feels like there's a bit more backlash in the center where it may give you a sense of disconnectedness with the rest of the car. And I thought that the Nissan Z has slightly more direct feel and better feedback compared to the Toyota Supra. With that said, I have to get something off my chest real quick, and something about steering feel and lack of feedback and so on and so forth, because this Toyota Supra and the Nissan Z have gotten some flack about there being a lack of steering feel. To an extent, that's true. These aren't track cars. You don't need to feel every square inch of the road like you do in track cars. In track cars, you need to know every little thing that goes on around you because you are driving at 10/10ths and every hundredths or a thousandth of a second matters. So the more information you have will help you as a race car driver. Whereas these are commuter cars, and sometimes you need that level of disconnectedness between you and the road because you don't want to overreact to every single thing out there. And remember that you're commuting in these things, so sometimes you may be slightly distracted, or you may sneeze or cough to the point where you might slightly tug at the wheel, and you don't want to send this car off to the side of the road. But with that said, these cars are still a lot better than what you'd find in SUVs or regular sedans. But between the two, I still think that the Nissan Z steering feels just a tad better than this Toyota Supra. So it's really going to come down to preference. And in my opinion, steering feel is something that you just get adjusted to. It's like picking up a different bat, swinging it a couple of times for a couple of days. You're just going to get used to what that bat is like. And it's just another opportunity for you to learn about what the car is like. Now, if I had to choose between the two, pound for pound, I think the Supra is a better car. Now, even though this doesn't hit the 400 horsepower mark, the Supra has better power to weight ratio, and the way the single turbo hits, man, that just feels more intoxicating. The Supra feels more raw and more like an athlete, whereas the Z feels more like a grand touring car and more comfortable for road trips. Now, stock for stock, I think the Supra has a better sounding exhaust as well. The Nissan Z has a more subdued manner about it, which is surprising considering how the previous VQ engine is prone to bursting eardrums. This Supra likes to produce the pops and burbles, especially if you put it into sport mode, and you could even hear the valves clicking on and off. And when you like to rev it up all the way to the top like this, it likes to produce the pops and burbles. And I know it's unnecessary for the car to actually do it, but so what? I love the sound, and as long as you like the way it sounds, does it matter if it's unnecessary? Now, if you plan on modifying your car and maybe drifting it, well, maybe it's not as clear cut, because currently, and I think you viewers out there might know this a little bit better than I do, but after reading the forums, it seems like for the Toyota Supra, the model years 2021 and a half and up, they seem to have a little bit tougher time trying to get this thing tuned. Whereas the Nissan Z, it seems like people are tuning it left and right. So if you like to modify the exhaust, the filters, and all the other stuff, like the downpipes and everything, you might have an easier time tuning it with the Nissan Z. And also, if you are into drifting, well, this one doesn't have a manual handbrake, so whereas the Nissan Z, all of that equipment is already built in. Now, if you haven't made up your mind at this point whether the Supra or the Z is the better car, maybe we should step outside and take a look at the exterior. Now, both of these cars are still on the rare side, but I see the Supra about 10 times more than I see the Z. And maybe that has a lot to do with the production numbers, or maybe the markup, or maybe just people's preferences. So I get pretty excited when I see a Z in person, whereas the Supra, it's cool, but it's been around the block for a few years. Now, the Z still has that new look, and I think the designers have done an awesome job bringing back some of that retro feel in a car that's basically a reskinned 370Z. The front end looks sharp and retro, and the Nissan Z has an unmistakable profile. You immediately know that it's a front engine, rear wheel drive, two-seater, and it just looks like a lot of fun. From the back, the lights remind me of the Z32-300ZX, my favorite Z before the newer Zs. And I also like that the designers did some tricks to make the Z look more muscular and slimmer by adding in a lot of blacked out sections. And I think they did a good job in general, though I'm not really a fan of the two-tone paint being more like a single paint job with some very large decals tacked on to give it that two-tone paint job. As for this new Supra, Toyota did a few things to freshen this up. This new premium paint is called the Stratosphere, and it's a new shade of blue. It's the kind of blue that makes you stop and stare because it's pretty eye-popping. It's more loud of a color compared to the downshift blue that's part of the original Supra set of colors, but it's not as loud as the refraction blue. Now, the new forged wheels also look so good. It's in the similar style that you could find in other GR cars. The wheel design has an aftermarket look and feel to it, and it also complements the red brake calipers really well. As for the design itself, this is still the same Supra, and from back here, this is the best place to stand and look at the Supra because I just love these wheel arches here. This rear quarter panel is so muscular, it looks so wide, and it gives me the old AC Cobra vibes where the body is built with hand-formed aluminum. It was really difficult to build. It gives me those classic car vibes. So in the end, I think there's a couple of things that the Nissan Z does better, and also some things the Toyota Supra does a little bit better as well. It really comes down to what you like better. You should really test drive these things. But me personally, to answer the original question, if I had $60,000, would I get the Nissan Z or the Toyota Supra? I'm going to lean towards the Toyota Supra because I think the driving experience is a little bit better than the Nissan Z. It feels newer, it has better power to weight ratio, and it feels more raw. And I'm always looking for that in these cars. The Nissan Z feels more like a grand touring car. It feels more comfortable to take on longer road trips, whereas this one is something that you'd probably want to take to the track. Now, it might not matter because the issue is really going to be about availability. And currently, it's a little bit easier to find these Toyota Supras compared to the Nissan Z. I have seen these cars so many more times compared to the Nissan Z. I have yet to find another Z on the road aside from the press car Z that I drove. With that said, I want to hear your thoughts on this. If you had that budget, would you choose the Toyota Supra or the Nissan Z? I want to hear it in the comments below. I want to thank you guys for watching all the way till the end. If you've learned something from this video, please consider hitting that like, subscribe, and that notification bell so that you can be notified the next time I make a new video. Let's wrap it up right there. My name's Hanson, and this has been a comparison between the new Nissan Z and this Toyota Supra with a 6-speed manual. I'll see you in the next one.